Today, we are talking about how to sell your business for top dollar. If you have a business and you've thought about selling it, we're going to talk about some of the strategies around how to do that. We're going to hear a story of someone who sold their business for top dollar. My guest today, Raleigh Williams, and I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders, and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and I love doing this because I get to meet interesting people each week. If you check out the archives, you'll see I've interviewed the co-founders and CEOs of Netflix, or Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard. Check out the archives. You can check those out. And I particularly love interviewing guests who fall into the very narrow category that I fall into, and my guest here today falls into, which is lawyer turned entrepreneurs. We are a tiny, tiny segment of the market. There's very few risk-averse lawyers who are able to go out, quit their big law job or small law job, and dive into the chaos, which is entrepreneurship, and actually survive doing it. And he's got a great story to tell about how that worked. We'll get to him in a second. First, of course, if you are a B2B business, you're interested in starting a podcast and getting traction and ROI from it, go to my website, rise25.com, and you can learn all about how we can help make sure that you get ROI from your podcast. Of course, my guest here today, Raleigh Williams. Now, Raleigh, first of all, such a pleasure to have you here today. You now help entrepreneurs on how to sell their business for life-changing multiples like you have. And you've got a podcast, the DealMaven Podcast, and you actually were a practicing attorney for a blink of an eye before realizing you didn't like it. And you started an escape room business, which I can't wait to hear the story behind that, and actually some other spin-off businesses related to it. And we were chatting beforehand about, I love to ask people about how entrepreneurial or not entrepreneurial they were as a kid. And you were one of those kids that kind of just knew that you were going to become a lawyer. How young were you when you'd figured that one out?
I grew up in a family of lawyers. My dad's a lawyer. I have a bunch of lawyers that are brothers and sisters that are older than me. I actually was positive I was going to play professional football until I stopped growing at 5'10", and I played quarterback. So it became difficult and not getting any college offers. And so I kind of grew up in the idea that, like, no matter what you want to do, getting a law degree and becoming a lawyer is the best training to do anything that you want. That was kind of the ethos that I grew up in. And I never thought to question it. I never thought to, like, oh, maybe that's not right. And so I grew up good at school, good at sports, and kind of just knew I wanted to be a lawyer until I did it, and very quickly realized that I did not want to do it anymore.
Man. And so growing up in a household with lawyers, with your dad practicing law, it never, I guess, sunk in. It's never quite the same thing as actually doing it yourself, right?
He was general counsel of a public company. He was a litigator. So he was kind of like, he kind of grew up in the time of practicing law where he could kind of do whatever he wanted. He did a lot of different things. He wasn't like you would see a normal big law attorney now that's a partner that kind of just like hyper specializes. And so I had seen him, I grew up, he was 50 years old. He had been practicing law for 25 years. And so I'd kind of seen a fully formed lawyer that got to kind of do whatever he wanted and was like the wisest guy in the room type of thing that everyone wanted his counsel. And I thought,
you didn't see the early years of misery. Yeah.
I didn't see the come up years on what it looked like. And then the bureaucracy that's associated with working at, I was working at some of the biggest law firms in the world at Skadden Arps and Vincent and Elkins. And, the bureaucracy and what they expect of you was very different than what I had expected going through law school, where I went to University of Chicago, where it's like, the world is your oyster. You're going to be, as soon as you go into the job market, they're going to say, tell us what to do and we'll do it. And then, the reality of working at a big law firm is you're the bottom of the totem pole, and they want, you're like a glorified secretary. Yeah.
Yeah. You're churning, you're just racking up those hours, and it can be not a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that was a big wake up for me, and very quickly in the first 6 weeks of practicing, I was like, I've made a massive mistake. I gotta do something else. I didn't know what it was until I kind
Wow.
of came into the escape room thing.
That had to be quite a gut punch in the first 6 weeks after spending, by the way, 3 years going to law school. Then you take the
Yeah.
bar exam over the
Mhm.
summer. Like you go and you graduate. And for those that don't know the way the law works, you go and then you study for the bar exam, which is misery at the end of 3 years, a 3-year just marathon. So it's not a lot of fun. That must have been just a hard reckoning.
Yeah, and I credit my wife a lot for that. She knew, I talk to a lot of people that are in jobs that they hate, and they just feel like the economics are keeping them there, and also kind of like the familial expectations of their spouse, kid, debt situation. And my wife, to her credit, always was like, "Hey, if you want to throw all of this away, like I'm down. Like we'll go do something else. We can figure it out." And I think had she not been so supportive of that, I don't know that I would have been able to do it. But it was
Wow.
yeah, it was a bumpy road for a bit.
And in your Twitter thread that you wrote about this, you said you were getting anxiety attacks before work every morning as you were going into the office, and you start researching different trends, and you kind of stumbled across escape rooms.
Yeah, I had switched practice groups a couple times, which is pretty atypical. Like the firm kind of knew that I was a problem child very quickly because I just wasn't happy, like no matter what partner they assigned me to. And um and so I got my real estate license, which is pretty atypical for a lawyer after passing the bar exam and
Yep.
making a couple $100,000 a year to go think about being a residential realtor.
Yeah.
um I started studying for consulting interviews to do kind of McKinsey Bain BCG management consulting stuff. So I started taking some interviews doing that. And I ultimately came across this article on MarketWatch that talked about escape rooms and how much money they made. And that kind of opened the window for me on the idea of maybe doing an escape room business, which seemed like a very low cost way to get started that could at least make enough money for me to replace my income at my law firm job. And so that was and then as I kind of started talking to the people who ultimately became my partners in the business, we kind of the three of us kind of decided that it could be something that we could make a run at. And that was kind of like the impetus for the exodus.
You mentioned a low cost, startup cost. I haven't done an escape room before, but from what I've seen, they always seem like they're very elaborate and everything. How much were you budgeting or planning to have to spend?
Now they are, and that was one of the ways that we felt like we could differentiate. Back in the day, back in 2015, 2016, there were people that were doing these escape room businesses for 25, 30 grand to get started, not investing a ton in the rooms. We had budgeted $200,000 between the three of us, and we got a loan for another 50 grand. So we felt like for 250 grand, we could really get it up and going and started. And that was kind of how we began doing it. I'd only been practicing law for 9 months, so I kind of came in as the operator, the guy who's going to put in the most sweat equity and be the one there running the store and hiring the people and doing all of the stuff. And then another guy was a Goldman guy and a KPMG guy, and
So
they were going
everyone's
to
kind
help.
of got their bona fides, got
Yeah.
credentials. Not no scrappy people here. It seems like.
No,
Yeah.
a bunch of highly qualified guys doing a dumb idea,
And not only that, okay, so you give your 2 week notice. By the way, they had just announced a raise for all the associates, and you give your 2
Right.
week notice. Maybe you didn't mention that one to your wife as you were on the way out the door. And you move into your in-laws' basement with your wife and your
Yeah.
2-year-old
Uh-huh. Yeah,
as you're
that's right.
building out this. And by the way, you didn't build out a physical location first. You did a bus. So tell us about that.
So we actually started investing in the physical location, and we went to try to open, and the city came and they shut us down, and they said, you need something called a certificate of occupancy, which you do not have. You have not you have not done any permits. We didn't pull any permits to start doing it. We just signed a lease.
After you'd opened, like shut you down, like couldn't do business.
After we had taken a customer, and the city that we were in, they shut us down. They gave us a red tag. They said, none of this stuff is up to code. You haven't had the fire marshal in here to know that this is okay. And so because of that, as we started to try to get the permits for it, we realized that like it was going to take us like 2 months for us to bring everything up to code. And so we felt like in that 2 months, we could buy an old school bus, a 1984 Bluebird bus. We had a welder that was kind of on staff helping us build all these rooms. So we stripped the bus out completely. Like we chopped off the back of the bus, put prison bars on, and we felt like we wanted to have a location. We wanted to have something that the city couldn't stop us, because if it's a bus, if it's a vehicle that's parked outside of a place, it's not subject to.
Got it. So it wasn't the same level of regulation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how we got started. We got the brick and mortar location up to code. And the beautiful thing was the three of us were very qualified on paper and very naive in terms of what we could achieve. And, we kind of like, we were like building out the escape bus now. If I were to plan it out, I would be like, you need at least 6 months to do it. We were so naive to like building procedures and how long things take and dealing with contractors and subcontractors and all that stuff, that we built massively aggressive timelines for ourselves that so we got ourselves in trouble every once in a while, like opening without a certificate of occupancy. But we just like all three of us, because we had kind of burned the boats to try to figure it out, we were like, we have to, we had to figure it out. And the beautiful thing about living in my in-laws' house is I never really wanted to go home. So I could work, I could work 20 hours. I could work 20 hours a day. And I was fine,
That's the key to successful entrepreneurship, is move into your in-laws' basement. That's it. Yeah. So you kind of, what were those early days like? Cause I want to get to 2 years into the business. You end up adding some additional kind of separate business models onto it, but how did you get traction in those early days? From opening the doors to having to shut them because of the red tag, and then opening them again 2 months later. How did people start to hear about it? How did you get people in the door?
Yeah, we picked a location right by the freeway. We just picked a very high traffic area. And when we weren't busy, we would take the bus out onto the freeway and park it by the side of the road. And we would pretend that there were prisoners in the bus. We were just like, we wanted to create spectacle any way that we could.
Like guys in like orange jumpsuits in the back of the prison bus?
Jumpsuits awesome. That you'd get from like a Halloween store. And we had never, it never dawned on us to run Facebook ads or do digital advertising. It just like, we didn't know what that was. Right. And so we just thought we wanted to make a public spectacle as much as possible on the freeway, and just kind of old school generate traffic from just having people see us as they drive by.
Yeah. So just 2 years into the business, which is really not that far in, you end up adding trampoline parks and axe throwing. What motivated that to kind of very different business model, wouldn't you? I would think.
Yeah, trampoline parks were 2 years in, and axe throwing was another year and a half after that. My brother, who was the Goldman Sachs guy, we had a trampoline park business that we had started before I went to law school. I sold my portion to him to go to law school. And so the first location that we had, the reason why we picked it was because there were this 8,000 square feet additional adjacent to the trampoline park that he had. And we kind of felt like it was a family entertainment dollar. And so even though the offering was different, it's still people looking to get entertained in a brick and mortar location outside of their house. Yeah. And as we started running those two businesses very separate brands, separate way to run them. And as we got into it, we realized, or we felt at the time, that there was enough cross-pollination between the two businesses that it would make sense for, on a going forward basis, to just open up full locations with all of these concepts kind of baked together into the location. So that ended up being what the model moved to. So 2 years after we opened that one in that first location, we opened up a second one and then a third one very shortly after that in Texas. And we felt like what we were trying to do is we were trying to create concepts that appealed to every age demo. A trampoline park is kind of like from 0 to, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And then escape rooms kind of picks up the high school kids onward. And so we were trying to get big spaces that we could have something for everyone to do. That was kind of like the idea as we started to expand. And it worked pretty well until a thing called COVID happened. And that
I want to get to that. Before we get to that though, I want to ask about I guess one thing that I would be hesitant about with an escape room business is that you'd be selling something that people would experience once and then never come back again because they'd already done it. Or did you not experience that because you had multiple additional rooms? And I've also heard that a lot of times escape room businesses end up changing things up after some period of time. How did you handle that?
Yeah, the two things that we tried to do was we tried to spend more than other would on kind of room design, room layout, and like having puzzles that were like interesting and high tech and things dropping from the ceiling and all that type of stuff. And then we had actors in basically all of our rooms. So we tend to do scarier themes like escaping a prison room or zombies or like the girl from The Ring and like an abandoned basement. And so the acting would be different every single time. So that way there's some variation in experience. As we ran the business, we realized that like over time, you basically get people that are like escape room enthusiasts and they love doing the room, even if they kind of know it's kind of like you may watch Shawshank Redemption once every 3 years, even though you know what's going to happen. Like you just enjoy the process of doing it. And but the majority of the market is kind of like someone who's just looking for something to do. And as long as they've done a room, as long as they're doing a room that they haven't done before. So like, we had 7,000 square feet. So in our biggest locations, we had 6 escape room kind of themes that they could pick from. And like, it was atypical for someone to churn through all of those. But a lot of times people will go and do it. And then they want to bring their friends to like go and do it again. And like, they like being the smartest one in the room. Yeah. Like knowing all of the answers and stuff is its own unique psychological experience.
It was an interesting trend because you're definitely on the upward trend in 2015. And then by 2019, the industry actually had more closures than openings. So, and that's before COVID hit. So what was that like when you start seeing that as a trend? And you had jumped on this trend because you saw it as a trend. So I imagine you noticed it in 2019.
Yeah. What we noticed was that people were just late to the game. And so they felt like they could open a business up with the same amount of investment that you could have done it in 2015. And so they were going to worse and worse locations, assuming that there was just so much demand for escape rooms that like people would show up no matter what. And what ended up happening is it was kind of like it was a little bit of a flight to quality. Like the best ones continued to do. It was kind of like a tale of two cities, the haves and the have-nots. And that was part of the reason that made our business sellable, is because we ended up building a really great reputation, a brand name around like being high quality, more expensive than everybody else. But, and you basically got these people that would, if they had 800 square foot office in like a Class C office complex, they would try to, throw a little piece of printed out paper on the door that says escape rooms here and put a couch in there with a TV and like try to, they would,
nothing.
There were so many people that were trying to open doing that because you could call yourself an escape room with essentially no barrier to entry. Yeah. And then those people were the ones that tended to peter out over time and, not last very long.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you wrote that because of your reputation in the marketplace, you were able to reinvest the profits back into growth and then kind of let it compound. What sorts of specific things did you do?
Yeah, for us, it was just location growth. It was let's go from one location to 3 to 5 to 7. And as we continue to grow the business, grow the locations, what we found was, um, yeah, just as we continue to grow the locations, it's like that was the best thing that we could do. In order to continue to grow the profit margin and to grow the brand, to just for us, the buyers that we ultimately found, they liked that the concept had been proven over and over again in multiple different locations. And we'd kind of gotten to a point of diminishing returns, like continuing to invest in a particular location, because what you find in these businesses particularly is that like 80% of your business comes Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And like you could spend your whole life trying to figure out how to improve a Tuesday night bookings and improve Tuesday nights. But like the demand in the market is the demand in the market. And a lot of times the best way to continue to grow is just go find an adjacent market and capture that demand there. And so that was the way that we found that growing the locations was, growing the location number was the best way that we could improve the enterprise value of the business.
Yeah. Now you end up selling off different pieces of the business, I believe over 8 or 9 deals or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You described it though as one network or one business that had a reputation. So walk me through, first of all, why you decided to sell the business, why you decided the timing was right. And I think it was 2020 was the first 2 locations.
Yeah,
So the COVID, I imagine, had something to do with it.
Sure. So in 2018, I'd been doing it for 2 years. We had a couple of trampoline parks. We hadn't done Axelrun yet. And I kind of felt like I had gotten into the business as a way to get out of the law, but it wasn't. I knew that it wasn't the thing that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I just knew that it wasn't that. And so I went to a competitor when we had, I think, we were building out our 3rd location at the time. And so I went to a competitor in the trampoline park business and I said, hey, we're looking at potentially exiting. And what do you think you would buy us for? They had private equity money. They had raised a couple $100 million. They had acquired a couple other big brands, and but mostly in the trampoline park space. So I went and met with him. He looked at the business. I was as transparent as I could be in terms of the numbers, and it was doing well. It was netting. It was netting somewhere between $1.5–2 million a year in profit. Like it wasn't a nothing business. And he looked at it and he basically said, your business is worth $0. It's not worth anything. I can't buy it because you're too diverse. You're too broad. You're not in any one specific geographic area. You have all these different brands and it's unclear how they interact. I don't know, you haven't proven to me that there's really synergies. I don't know that I want to be in the escape room business, even though I'm already in the trampoline park business. And so he kind of outlined all of these issues that we had created for ourselves. And so it took us 2 years to kind of figure out how to, run each P&L as a separate P&L and run each business separately, run each brand separately, and kind of like the needs of the brand needed to be like, we had to just focus on the individual silos for a period of time to show that the escape room business could do well, the trampoline park business could do well. And what we ultimately found as I started trying to sell these businesses off was that it would make more sense that the trampoline park buyer doesn't want to be in the escape room business. They don't view it as family entertainment like we had viewed it. We kind of viewed it like we wanted to spread across all the demos and capture everyone irrespective of age. And the buyers really didn't view it that way. They viewed it as I'm going to get into, I have to manage 2 very separate things with very, very unclear synergies between them.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we realized that we would make more money selling each business off, selling really each location off and each business within the location off separately to separate buyers instead of trying to go as one package deal. We had always run it as what we called Williams Entertainment Group, as my brother and I are the biggest owners of the business, the Williams brothers. So it was Williams Entertainment Group. And then in order to really take it to market, we had to break it all down. And the escape rooms were bought by haunted house operators. The trampoline park businesses were bought by SBA buyers or trampoline park operators, axe throwing people, so like every buyer wanted their own thing and they didn't want to be in multiple business segments.
That makes sense. I mean, our company has been looking at acquiring other companies, and I've looked at a few where they have a couple of very different businesses mushed together, and to them, it makes sense. To you, it's like, well, wait a second, I got to figure out this business model and this business model, and they're very different. It may be a different buyer. In the midst of all this, COVID hits. So take me back to March 2020 when COVID hits and you realize, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to shut this thing down. You're in Texas, so I think that lasted about a week and a half. What was that like?
I wish. So and COVID at 20. So we went under contract on our first 2 escape room businesses in November of 2019, and we said, let's close it on. So we were under contract for $2 million to sell the first 2 escape room businesses to this buyer, and we said, SBA is going to the SBA is going to require that he had his tax returns done. So he wanted to acquire the business on April 1st. We made this joke. We said, well, let's not close on April Fool's Day in case this all looks like a joke to all of us. Like, let's close it on April 15th just to make sure. And so we had been in diligence and we were under contract. I mean, he gave us purchase money. He put some money down in order to make sure that we knew that he was going to close and he was getting his SBA loan done. And so then my birthday's March 16th. And so the day that was like declaring it a national pandemic was March 16th. That was my birthday. And, and so we were 2 weeks out from closing on this deal. And the SBA will not loan you money if the business is closed. And so we were trying to find a way to keep the Utah locations open of the escape room business. So that way, and he still wanted to buy it. Like, he didn't get flighty, to his credit. Wow. And so anyway, that was, it was interesting. One, because we were in the midst of a transaction, we were in the midst of the first transaction. And secondly, because in every pitch deck that we had ever done, to either our internal team of going to a new location, and we had brought investors on the last 2 parks that we had built, we had this slide that was always about how recession proof the business was, because we had always felt like, and the analogy that we put that we wholeheartedly believed in was, in 07, 08, Disney raised their prices, and even if there's a downturn, like we all felt like we were due for, even if there's a downturn, families will still always want to escape, and they'll always have a place to, they want their kids to have birthday party memories. And, we're in this recession resistant business that even if the economy goes down, that just means that real estate prices are going to go down, and it's going to be a way for us to acquire these buildings instead of leasing them. And that was the narrative that we had completely believed in until COVID happened. And we realized
it's like very, very different.
And we realized that we were just wrong. And so then the next 6 months were basically negotiating with landlords, trying to keep landlords didn't have any other alternatives. No other tenant was trying to come in and say, let me open this new space, And so it was by far the most stressful time. That was much more stressful than when we were just starting out and I was living in my in-laws' basement, because we'd been running it for 4 years and I had made millions of dollars from operating the businesses, and I had a big house and I was living the entrepreneur lifestyle. And then the idea of going back down to living in my in-laws' basement was much more terrifying than it was leaving the law with nothing to really lose. You know what I mean?
Probably had more mouths to feed by this point.
Yeah,
also
had 3
too.
Three kids, and even in that time, I was like, shit, where is my resume? Because I may have to go get a law firm now.
The worst. And meanwhile, you're kind of brushing off your legal skills by going and negotiating with reading over the lease, your commercial lease and stuff, and seeing, oh my gosh, what options do I have here?
brushing off force majeure, and
right. What does that mean exactly?
Trying to figure it out.
Reading some case law on that's been a blast. So anyway, so you end up I guess closing that deal eventually later in 2020. By that point,
we closed it in June.
Okay.
We actually took a $250,000 haircut to close it. But we were he still wanted the business, and I think he knew that he had some leverage in order to
that's not bad. Yeah, considering everything was still shut down at that point.
Yeah, we were. It was a win. Like, I've talked to him many times since then. He still owns the business. He still runs it. I think it's been a great acquisition for him. It's made total sense, and we were happy to get out of it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first transaction that then we just copied that playbook, and we went location by location and sold the businesses off in a very similar way. I would put the business on biz buy sell, manage all the inbound inquiries, and find the buyer that made the most sense, and then make it happen location by location. Did
you use a broker or do that all yourself?
I just did it all myself. Doing it over again. I felt like I had to do it all myself because we were in so many different states, and I had so many different partners amongst all of the locations that I think it would have been messy. Now, when I take a business to market, I'll almost always use a broker, because it's just not like, if you have a good broker, they're totally worth their salt doing it. And back then I felt like the 10% that I was going to give up was going, I just couldn't stomach doing that. And now I've become wiser.
I want to get to some of the work that you've done since selling those businesses. Before we do, I want to ask you about just kind of reflecting back on that trajectory with the escape room business. What are some of the lessons that you take away from it? I know I'll say that just looking, at finding an industry that is on an upward swing is certainly helpful.
Yeah. That would be the first thing that I would say, is that if you are building something into increasing demand, into a trend that is growing, you can't outperform the wave that you've decided to ride. And so we were lucky to ride to the trampoline park business, family entertainment. Like, those were two waves that were doing very, very well. And it covers up a lot of really stupid stuff. Like, you could make a lot of mistakes in a market that's increasing demand. Like, I assume in your podcast business, I think my assumption is more and more and more people want to do podcasts.
Yeah.
And so, like, that wave, like, it covers up a multitude of errors and it gives you a massively wide margin of safety to make decisions, and and you don't have to be perfect. And one mistake that we made is we were doing so well in those family entertainment businesses that we thought that we were really smart guys. And so we opened up a bar in downtown Salt Lake, which we knew nothing about. Neither one of us drink. I've never even had alcohol in my life. And we thought that a bar would be a really smart thing to do. And we picked a market where, like, the demand for bars in the market was pretty, stable to slightly on the decline. And the difficulty of running that business in a tepid demand market versus the escape room business and the trampoline park business in an increasing, growing, demand market, it was just night and day difference. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing, is like, if you're building something that more and more people are tending to want, it made things so much easier. And as we started to do things that we thought that we were just smart guys because we had built stuff where there's demand, and we did it where there wasn't demand or growing demand, it became much more difficult.
Yeah. And as you reflect back on the profession that you and I both left, law, which has had impact from AI and things like that, what are your thoughts on, that industry?
Yeah, I think that as an industry, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to make a lot of money practicing law. I'm sure it's like anything, it's a flight to quality. right? And like the best, I don't think Cravath will go out of business in the next 100 years. But I think someone who's trying to do something, it just the I think what you'll find is that there will be the rewards will not make it worth it. Like the juice just won't be worth the squeeze. The squeeze will get much harder. It'll be much harder to get the results that and AI and all of those kind of market forces, I think will just make it really difficult. I think I would be very hesitant to start a law practice unless I had a unique form of distribution. I think audience building and distribution building and having the ear of someone who trusts you. I think that ends up being the kind of the sifter of the wheat and the chaff and this day and age, much more than like the quality of the work output,
right?
Which was the answer, 15, 20 years ago.
That was the only answer, right? And none of those other things really mattered. It was all about the quality. And so now some people think that that's the only answer. And now you've done some acquisitions since then, some of which I think we were chatting before, and you said you wouldn't make again. Tell us about what types of acquisitions you made after exiting the escape room and the trampoline park businesses.
Yeah, I after I sold those businesses, I kind of got in the mindset of like, I never want to start a business again. I never want to start from scratch again. I never want to start from scratch again. I only want to run something. So my parameters were, it can't be something that's at zero. I will not start something again. And secondly, I only want to back people. I don't want to operate. I don't view myself as a great operator of businesses. And so I only wanted to buy things where the entrepreneur operator was staying on board and needed some help in order to get it to the next level.
Yeah. Of course, that is fraught with danger, right? Because oftentimes that entrepreneur owner, once they are acquired, they end up being miserable. They don't enjoy it. So how do you filter that out and ensure that you get someone who's going to thrive in that type of arrangement?
Yeah. And that's a question that I don't have the answer to yet. No. Yeah. And that has been, I think the mistakes that I've made have been acquiring businesses that have been too small, businesses that aren't big enough yet to really be able to afford an operating team that really knows how to take it to the next level. And secondly, businesses that are so dependent on the entrepreneur as the artist, or as kind of like the magician behind the scenes that makes everything work, that and really feeling comfortable with myself that like they're not wanting to sell a part of the business because they're just tired and they want to take their chips off at the table. Because I like all of the acquisitions that I've done. I've learned a great deal. I haven't lost money on, in entrepreneur world, typically it's like, if you can get a great lesson and it doesn't knock you out and you don't lose money on it, then like that's a win, even though maybe it's not the economic win that you would have hoped that it could have been. But I think in the acquisition world, and I knew this because when I sold those businesses, there's so much in a business that there's so many skeletons in a business. and most businesses, I've been in, businesses that most businesses are slow moving dumpster fires, and no matter what the profit and loss statement says, there's just problems that and some of them are systemic that will never get solved no matter how smart you think that you are. And some of them are personnel, like until you change the personnel, the business won't change. And so for me, the thing that I've learned is that I'm always wanting to make sure that I myself have a clear escape path, a clear way to exit the business in the off chance that that it's more difficult to improve it than what I originally think at the outset when I'm looking at it and saying, man, there's so much, low hanging fruit here that can
Yeah.
get capitalized on.
So the companies you've acquired, it doesn't sound like there's any regrets around like industry or vertical or geography or anything like that.
No, I think size. What I've had to remember is that, until you're at really, I would say $1 million a year in revenue and call it, $400,000 to $500,000 a year in profit, because I tend to buy higher margin businesses, not like e-com, shipping and receiving from
With
China
thin
type
margins.
businesses. Yeah, like until you're at about 500 grand a year, you really don't have product market fit yet. And so I bought things that are, in the $300,000 to $400,000 a year revenue, making $200,000 to $250,000 a year. And even though I've gotten in at very favorable valuations, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to really find what the business, you're still at the embryonic stage of that business. And there's a lot of uphill climbing left in order to figure out what the business is. And you have to have people that have a long-term mindset in order to figure that out together.
Yeah. So what you found is in those acquisitions, then you've had kind of more work fixing it up. It's a big fixer upper that you got to put it. Yeah.
Even if it's trending, right? Even if it's growing and even if it's trending the right way, it's still a fixer upper in the sense of like the growth can also be like a false signal, right? You could be growing the wrong way. You could be growing away from product market fit, even though your revenue and your profit are growing. You may find yourself hitting a wall very soon because that's an
interesting point. Growing away from product market fit. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think especially when you're pretty system light, when the business is growing based on the sheer charisma or audience of the founder, and you can find clever ways to bring revenue in and service customers, but it almost encapsulates the founder at the center because like they're the only person who can fulfill on the thing that you're selling, or it moves them further and further into the center of the business because yes, you can sell to their audience, but finding a way to grow through cold customer acquisition is very difficult because people only want it from this founder particularly. So you can find ways to continue to, drive revenue, drive profit. But if it's done in a way that is so founder dependent, you're not really growing a business. You're growing a cash flow stream for the founder, which is great. But like, you have to figure out a way to extricate yourself from that. And a lot of times it takes, it feels like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. It feels like you're making the business. It feels like you're turning away growth opportunities that look like attractive opportunities, but you can't build a business there outside of the founder. You become more founder dependent. You have more key man risk.
We were talking beforehand about the great book, Buy Then Build by Walker Dybel, who I interviewed a couple of months ago. And he's a big advocate of acquiring businesses and then fixing them up. So other than what you said about the size of the business, so you would acquire a larger business that has more product market fit, what other factors or indicators do you look at to determine whether it's a good target for you to acquire?
My answer to this has changed over time. Where it is today is more and more I look at the business, and one of the first things that I felt when I sold that first escape room business and got the check for a couple $1 million, whatever, and I saw it in the bank account, and I thought, that was not worth doing. That was so much harder than I thought that it should have been. That like a lot of times I myself fall into the idea of like the ends justify the means. I'm going to buy this business, even though I don't understand it. I don't like it. I don't like the customers. I don't like the product. I don't care about it. I'm going to do all of this stuff that I hate doing. And that because I'm so captivated by the potential opportunity that I see, that like the end of ultimately selling it will be totally worth the means of doing all of this stuff in the interim that I hate doing. So I think I would have made fewer mistakes in the acquisitions that I've done, if I only bought things that I never want to sell, that I only buy trophy assets that I'm just stoked to own for the rest of my life. And I have an unlimited time horizon, because every story that I've convinced myself, whether I was operating a trampoline park business, an escape room business, and any of the businesses that I've acquired along the way, or some that we've kind of started, if I ask myself, in 20 years, do I want to continue to own this thing? And the answer is yes. Then like your margin of safety is massive, because you have like such a long time horizon in order to get it done. When you're buying something simply because you feel like it's worth more than what you're buying it for, you feel like you're getting a good deal, you feel like you're getting it for cheap relative to what it could be worth otherwise, and you hope that in 12 months you're able to flip it to a greater fool who will pay you more than what you bought it for. There's so much that you can be wrong about. And it's a lot of work, and like ultimately, it's a lot of work that's not appealing work if you're only doing it for financial arbitrage. You know what I mean? You end up wasting a lot of your life hoping to exploit a financial arbitrage that may or may not be there,
right,
relative to like, I love this business and I'm buying it because I never want to sell it. I think you're so much safer to A, do something that you enjoy, and B, probably make an acquisition that makes a ton of sense for you in the future. And so that's changed for me over time, as I've looked less and less for like, what can I get super, super cheap that I can hopefully flip down the road.
Yeah. Now, a couple of years ago, your wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 3 breast cancer. You guys went through a real tough scare there. It sounds like she is on the upward swing now, thankfully. How has that changed your focus, changed your approach to everything we're talking about here in terms of how you spend your time and what types of businesses you want to spend your time on?
Totally. I think for me, it's made all of my answers much more qualitative than quantitative, because like that answer that I just gave of like, do something that you love, do like something that you would enjoy. Right. Those are all of the answers that I would always hate when I was listening to something like this, of like, I don't know what I want to enjoy. I want to be rich, and then I'll figure out what I want to enjoy.
Yeah.
I think that going through that experience with her, and realizing how quickly things can change, and really how, you just have no idea what's on the horizon for you. And we tend to always think that what's on the horizon is better and up and to the right and more zeros in the bank account, and things that are easier. But sometimes what's up on the horizon is choppier waters than you've ever experienced in the past. And so I think it's given me a greater sense of gratitude. I work much less, honestly. I work much less than I did through cancer. And it also helped me, going through cancer in a lot of ways, like helped me realize the reliance that I have on work in order to escape my reality. And how I needed to be more well-rounded in the way that I approached work, and what I'm hoping to get out of work, and what are goals for me that are worth having. And I think that at the end of the day, I was always the one that was like, I want to get rich and then I'll figure out everything else. And And as I got rich enough to know that like, as I got rich enough, I realized that like, I was so grateful that I got enough money in my early 30s to realize that like, that I didn't get to that when I was 65 and realize, oh shit, I've wasted 35 years of my life for like this is nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's super hard. What I tell my closest friends is, and what I tell the people that I do business with is like, I want to get you rich enough for you to know that it's not the answer. Like, I don't think that you should just go join a monastery and, just meditate for the rest of your life. I think you should get rich. And once you're rich enough, you'll realize this is not it. And what else,
What's the next
what could
tackle?
the answer be? Yeah, totally. And I think that's kind of human progression.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I love talking to folks like you. I love hanging out with successful entrepreneurs because then you realize that there's just other hills to climb, and might not be financial. It might be something else. You mentioned the word gratitude, which is a perfect segue to my last question. And this all has been great, Raleigh. Thank you so much for your time. But, as you look back on your journey and you think about who in particular you're grateful to, a lot of us reflexively will mention our family and friends, which is totally fine, or our teammates. But I love to also hear stories about peers, contemporaries, business partners, mentors, and the more specific the better. But I love to hear those types of stories of who you would want to shout out publicly and just thank them for helping you along the way.
Sure. I remember when I was thinking about quitting law, I told my dad that I wanted to quit, and he's told me that I would be throwing my career away. It'd be the worst decision I'd ever make, which I could be grateful for that in some way, but he's not who gets to shout out this time. I went and talked to a friend who was kind of like the wealthiest guy that I knew in Dallas, a guy named Steve Houghton. And I asked him what he thought I should do. I've been practicing law for 7 months, and I showed him this escape room thing that I thought that I wanted to do. I showed him a little mock-up of like what the store was going to look like, and I was all stoked about the name Alcatraz, whatever.
Whole story sounds crazy now, doesn't it? Thinking back on it now, like
it's insanity.
Yeah.
And to his credit, Steve heard me out, and he said, what he said to me was, for a lot of people, they can't do what you're asking to do because they don't have a spouse that's supportive. But with how supportive your wife is, it's your responsibility to do this as big as you possibly can. And you should only do something that if you're right, you get rich. And if you're wrong, you don't go broke. So he's like, you're already broke, so it doesn't matter. And it seems like the economics of this thing make enough sense that like, if you do this thing right, you can get rich enough to figure out what your next thing is. And it doesn't look like, he's like, I don't think that this won't be your greatest contribution to Earth, is starting this escape room business. But like, the more time you spend in the law, the more time you'll be trapped there. And with the wife and the child that you have, it's your responsibility to go do something much bigger than being a lawyer at a big firm. And so you need to do this. This is something that you need to do. And so him and my wife were really the only two people that were like massively supportive of the idea. And I think without the confidence that they showed in me in order to make the decision, I'd still be practicing law somewhere, just because it would have been too wide a chasm to jump. You know what I mean? Too scary of a thing to do. And so I'm forever grateful for Steve to, help guide me along the way when I needed it the most.
Yeah, that's so great. Raleigh, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you? I know you do consulting. DealMaven.io, I believe, is at least one of your websites. Where can people go?
Yeah, DealMaven.io is great. I'm most active on Twitter, probably. So either one of those two spots are perfecto.
Excellent, Raleigh. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.